Morning, Kime.
Morning, Tom. Hey, good morning, Mr. Dennis. How are you?
Okay.
Okay. Good, 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 good. Yeah, I reached out to Sherry. I'm waiting on her to get back about the co-packers. But I don't think we're there yet. But I'm trying to figure out, okay, where do we go from here to get to there? There's got to be something in between, and we're trying to navigate that now without having to build our own facility. So we'll
Well, one,
see.
one of the one of the things you might look into, I don't know why this is echoing. I'm going to try something here. Is that not echoing now? Okay. It's not. All right. Um, there are a number of, I think they're called incubator kitchens.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
lot of community colleges have them. I know that, remember Ginny O?
Yep.
That's where she does her production.
Yep.
And I don't know if there's one around you. I know there's one here in Duplin County that a lot of people use.
Yep. We've got several, and in fact, I've picked up a new account through one the other day, but they don't have the equipment I need in order to do the scale that I need to do.
Okay,
So, it would just be transferring it from my kitchen to their kitchen and doing the same basic process, but paying them to be there. Um,
I
so
see.
I need specialized equipment to make that work. I could take some of the equipment I've got there, but then they want to charge me to storage and everything else. And I'm like, that just really is not fitting my bill. So
Yeah,
if I can do that, I can just do it here. But
yeah,
so we'll see. We'll finagle it out. Well, one way or another. Yeah, it's just it's cool. But like my wife said, you want to turn over responsibility. I said, well, in a perfect world, I would love to control everything, but we're not in a perfect world. And if we continue to grow, no, I cannot control it all. We're going to have to phase something out somewhere. So, yeah,
yeah,
but it's all right. That's part of the learning process too.
yeah. I know that the other thing I've heard about, and I can't remember their name, but I think there's a co-packer in Charlotte that's pretty good size that does a lot of snacks.
Right.
I'll I'll try to dig that name up.
Yeah,
Um,
I've heard of 6 in 1, and then there's a place over here in Greensboro that handles Chad's popcorns, but that's all they do. They just want to do popcorn snacks, and I'm like, yeah, that's not really going to help me out much. So,
yeah.
you know, who knows? I may end up having to build a facility. Not that I wanted
Well,
to.
yeah. I hope you don't have to. I know that uh, Jenny has been making cheese straws for 20 years. And I know she's been through a number of different sources. And I don't know if she requires anything special or not from equipment perspective. But one person that seems to, do you remember OMG? Um, I think they're called OMG. What is that stuff called? Oh, they were in our class. What is the kind of cheese that everyone loves? Southern cheese.
Oh, pimento cheese.
Yeah, OMG pimento cheese.
OMG pimento. Yeah.
She's, I think, in Wilson,
Yep.
and I believe she has figured something out because I think she started getting, at one point, she was starting to get a lot of growth, a lot of new accounts and stuff. So I'm pretty sure she moved to some kind of facility in Wilson. My memory's a little hazy, but she's also making these cheese straw things in addition to the pimento cheese, I think. A little hazy on that, but anyway, that's another possibility. But I would assume Sherry is in a position to know. And Chris Dukes, do you know him?
Yeah, I did a series with Chris where he's promoted all that, and so yeah, we know Chris.
Okay, I think he's the president of the Specialty Food Association, even though he's got a cookie company or some kind of snack company. But he's been doing it for quite a while as well. And then the other person that comes to mind who's just very resourceful is Sana.
Yeah, yeah, she is.
She might be, knowing her, it wouldn't surprise me if she, now I don't know how she makes her. Does she make her stuff in her kitchen?
I don't. I didn't think so. I really don't know, but with the packaging and everything I've seen, I'm kind of surprised if she did. So I think it was packed out too. But yeah, I've got a call to. Well, after this class, we're going to have a call with Samantha, Cottage Lane's Kitchens. I
Oh,
wanted
good.
her take on it. Yeah. Because I know she's using a co-packer and she said, well, I don't know what I can tell you. She said, but I can give you my experiences and at least give you some ideas thinking about it and how she navigated through that. So yeah, so I'm trying to use our circle here to gather as much information and ideas as I can. So,
Yeah. The other person to check out is Wayne Boswell
yep.
from
Yep.
Joyfilled Foods, because I think he has a facility. I think he bought his company
Yep.
from somebody who had been, doing it for quite a few years. So I think he's got a facility. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm
Uh,
hoping to speak with him tomorrow. We'll see
okay.
him at the flavors. Yeah, it was crazy because he said the day he signed his papers is the day everything went to shutdown when he bought his business. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. He said, nope. He said, that's where I started. And I said, well, you could only
Incredible.
go up from there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's a good guy. He's doing really well, I hope, or at least last I heard he was. So I wish him all the best.
Yeah. Well, I'll be there tomorrow also. So hopefully I'll see
We'll
you
make a
there,
right. Yep.
and well, I'm looking forward to it. Looks like quite a few companies are going to be there.
Yep.
All right. Hey, Teresa Ranson, how you doing? All right.
Hello.
Hi. I'm going to go ahead and get started with how to launch again and again. And this is another one of the things we got from Y Combinator. Again, it'll have kind of a tech orientation, but there's some really good stuff here about the mentality of launching over and over again. And the idea really is launching to different markets and to different people and different groups. We tend to think that when you launch something, that's it. You're launched and the ship is sailing in the water. But in reality, there's so many different channels and so many different groups that maybe this woman's ideas might prompt something a little bit different. So let's give it a shot here. Hopefully, the echo won't come back from whatever reason that was happening. Okay.
Yalik. I'm a partner at Y Combinator, and one of the things I help founders do a lot is prepare to launch. That is what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I want to change the way that you think about launching. So most people think about launching as something that you get one shot at. So for example, I just talked to a team that's been preparing to launch for 6 months. They were lovingly trying to get every pixel perfect on their product before they shared it with everyone. And now they are stressing over every line on their landing page. And, they're trying to line up everything right with timing. But if you're like most startups, you will launch something and no one will care. And if it took you 6 months to get there, your startup is probably going to be dead before you get another chance to launch. So in the same sort of spirit as always be shipping, I want you to think about launching as something you can continually do. I want to destroy the idea that launching is just this one moment in time, because assuming you do well and assuming you ship new products and new features, you are never going to be not launching. So let's talk about all the ways that you can launch. Here are different opportunities to launch that we're going to go through today. I'll go through each of these except press launches. We have done a previous startups lecture on press launches, and I'll share a link to that and some resources, after this. But we'll go over most of these, and most of these things are things that you should be doing while you're in startup school. So let's talk about first why you want to continuously launch. So before you even have a fully functioning product, you get a chance to practice your pitch, and you can refine it. You can A/B test it and see how people actually respond to the idea. And then once you have an MVP or a very early version of your product, launching through different channels will give you an opportunity to see how people will respond to that early version of the product. And then launching to different channels will help you determine whether you're even talking to the right users, because you might launch on one channel and get no response. You'll launch on another channel and you'll get a huge response, and so that will help you identify whether you're identifying the right user for what you're building. So let's talk about some of the types of launches that you can do while you're in startup school. And I'm excited to hear that, 1,000 of you have launched so far since the start of startup school. That's incredible. So I clicked on 10 random startup school companies from founders who posted on the forum, and only about half had landing pages. So this is what I call the silent launch. And you do not need anything fancy for this. All you need is a domain name, your company name, a short description, a contact, and a call to action. So for example, this is a random startup school company that I found from a founder who'd posted on the forum. Their company is Zinc. They have, a domain name, they have their company name, they have their, short one-line pitch, a short description, and their call to action, which is get in touch. The call to action can be something like, subscribe to our newsletter or subscribe to hear more when we launch. Product Hunt, for example, has an actual product for pre-launch companies called Ship. And it's a way to collect potential, interest from potential users. So for example, this is something called Designer School. And it has a quick intro from the founders, a short description of what the company does, and the call to action, which is subscribe. So, you can go on Product Hunt and set up one of these pages. But of course, you can also build your own landing page incredibly quickly and easily. And this should be something, if you don't have one yet, that you do this weekend. So the next thing is the friends and family launch. So if you're at idea stage, you can test out your short pitch on family and friends and see how they respond. And once you have an MVP, do a friends and family launch as quickly as possible. So in its earliest days, Reddit was shared just among the founders of their batch at YC. There were only 8 companies. It was a really small community. I used the Wayback Machine to actually see what Reddit looked like in its earliest days. It hasn't changed that much. But if you look closely, this is actually before they called upvotes. They were calling it boosts. This is like 2005, I think July. So that's how they got their very first users, just sharing it among their community of founders. What I recommend you do is share the product with your friends and family, watch them use it, sit down next to them and ask for feedback. But don't stay in this phase for too long, because your friends and family might not be the exact right ideal user for your product or what you're building. And so sometimes their feedback isn't quite as helpful as a real user's is. So for example, if Alexis and Steve had shared this with their parents, their parents might have been like, what the hell is this? So you get out of that, family and friend circuit as fast as you can. And so the next move would be to launch to strangers. So one of my favorite examples of a YC company launching to strangers is the company Lug. So Lug is an app that lets you call movers and delivery people on demand. So even before Lug had built a fully functioning app or product, they would rent a truck and they would go drive to IKEA and they would sit outside of IKEA. So they would watch shoppers and they'd look for people who were having a particularly difficult time tying stuff to the top of their cars. And they'd run up to those customers and they'd say like, hey, instead of trying to tie this, mattress on top of your car, wouldn't it be cool if you could just push a button and someone with a truck would come and help do this for you? And, the customers would be like sweating and they'd be like, yes, that's exactly what I need at this moment. And, they'd download the app. They'd click the Lug button and then the founder would run back to the parking lot, drive up in his truck, and then the customer would be like, oh my God, it's you. And they were like, yeah, so it was a real hustle at the beginning. Like none of this was working on the back end, but it really confirmed for them that this was a hair on fire problem for their users and customers. And so they decided it makes sense for us to really build this out and spend time, on this product. So launching to strangers will help do that for you. It will help show you whether people are actually willing to download and pay for what it is you're building. Let's talk about online communities. This is actually one of my favorite ways to launch. I think you should plan a launch for every single community that you are part of. So when a company goes through Y Combinator, they have the option of launching on Bookface before they launch publicly. So Bookface is our internal platform at YC. It's like Facebook meets LinkedIn meets Quora. And there are currently over 4,000, other founders on Bookface. So it's a fairly low risk way to launch because it's not totally public, but there is enough of an audience there to get some feedback. And you're launching in front of, fairly friendly people who, want to see you succeed. And so they launch there. And what I think you guys are particularly lucky because you have Startup School and you have the Startup School forum, which about 40,000 founders are on. So if you have an early version of your product, there is literally no reason that you shouldn't be launching to the startup school community in the next few weeks. And so, I also think that founders and other people making and building stuff, they give the best early product feedback. So you have thousands of other founders at your disposal. So I think that, that this, kind of gives you a leg up here. Here's a sort of extreme example of a company that successfully launched in online communities. So Magic is an on-demand personal assistant. When they started in Y Combinator in 2015, they were actually building a blood pressure monitoring app. So they were trying to get this blood pressure monitoring app to grow, and it wasn't growing as quickly as they were hoping. So they decided, let's test out another idea that we had. So they sent a link around to their friends and family, and it just looked like this. It basically said, like, text this phone number and we'll make anything happen like magic. Like, it was very, very basic. And one of their friends thought it was so cool that they shared it on Reddit and Hacker News. And basically overnight, like over the course of a weekend, 40,000 people signed up to use Magic. And so of course they were like, oh my God, this is crazy. And let's be honest, this is an extreme case, and almost no one who launches on Reddit and Hacker News is going to get 40,000 users overnight. But my point is, it's definitely worth putting yourself out there because, you might be one of those like extreme cases, but at the very least, you'll get some early users and you'll get some great feedback. So many of the startups that go through YC launch on Hacker News and Product Hunt. And we over time have looked at the stats of how well these launches convert. So, a TechCrunch launch versus a Product Hunt launch versus a Hacker News launch. And in terms of converting to users, they're starting to even out in terms of their impact and conversion for, whether it's, your signups or, converting to customers. So if you're launching in these communities and aren't active members of these communities yet, my suggestion is that you spend a little bit of time looking at the communities. You understand the rules, especially if you're posting to subreddits, right? They all sort of have their own, moderators have their own rules. Understand the best way to talk to these communities. And if it's a community that's known for being helpful, ask for advice, ask for feedback. If you're not part of these communities, I'd reach out to someone who is and ask them for advice. Ask them for the best way to launch, because there are going to be tips for every community. And, for example, one company in this batch, was building something that he wanted to get more, women's perspectives on. And they're, 2 male founders. And one of the users of Alpha, which is a community for women in tech, said, hey, I'll post that to, to Alpha for you. And I'll tell you what kind of feedback they got. So I recommend connecting with someone in the community and asking them for help if you're not part of the community yourself. The biggest piece of advice I have for launching on online communities is write like you talk. Do not talk like a marketing robot. People hate that. So don't use marketing language or deep jargon. Talk like a human when you're addressing the community. So all you need in these, when you introduce yourself in these posts, introduce yourself, talk about what you're building, talk briefly about why you're doing it or how you came across the problem. People on Hacker News, for example, are super intellectually curious. So are there any interesting insights that you've learned from talking to potential users or your users? Is there anything surprising or delightful that you could share with the community? Because people love that. And they also want to ask you questions, but sometimes don't know exactly how or which questions they should ask you. So tee it up for them. Say, hey, I'm an expert in X, Y, and Z, and I'm happy to answer questions on these topics. Otherwise, you risk people going down all sorts of weird rabbit holes. And just make sure that you sort of are sharing this community, asking them for advice. Try to cut down as much of the jargon and marketing as possible out of these pitches. The request for access launch, the Magic story that I shared with you actually reminded me of this other type of launch you can do. So when Magic launched, overnight they got 40,000 people signing up. And of course they couldn't serve 40,000 users immediately. So they launched a waitlist. And they also gave people ways to skip the line. So for example, if you tweeted about Magic, you'd get, to skip a few spots in the line. So you can build these viral elements into your launches that will help get people to spread the word for you. One of my current favorite examples of this request for access launch is Superhuman. So Superhuman is building a better email experience. So you can go to their site here and request access. And you can also ask a current user to refer you, and then that'll help you skip the line. So in the signature of all emails that are sent by Superhuman users is a little tag that says sent by Superhuman. And so I'm a Superhuman user, and I get a ton of emails. Like, I'll send a ton of my emails out to people, and I get a ton of emails asking me for referrals. So, people I email say, hey, how did you like Superhuman? Would you mind referring me to the product? So if you have a product that you can build this sort of viral element into, I highly recommend it. So we don't have a huge amount of time because obviously social media and launching to bloggers is this huge and long and well-covered topic. But I wanted to skim them briefly and give you an example of a company that we worked with that did it very well. As most of you know, launching to popular blogs that cover your industry or trade can be incredibly powerful. So Joy is a free wedding website builder, and they were one of the fastest growing companies in their batch. And a lot of their early growth, like an alarming amount of their really early growth, was due to being placed on a number of lists like this. They essentially Googled, they looked at, SEO, and they Googled, best wedding website builders and figured out who was coming up on, the first couple pages of results on Google. And they reached out to all those bloggers and, they said, hey, we have this new product. We think your community would love it. Would you be willing to add us to this list? And they said that they reached out and basically did a drip campaign to over 50 bloggers and only got responses from 4. But those 4 responses made a huge impact for their early growth. So one note that I want you to keep in mind is that some blogger and influencer opportunities are pay to play. And Joy did not pay early on, and I do not want you paying early on either. If folks are asking you to pay, please find other or creative routes to get around this, because as startups, as early stage startups, you just don't have you don't have the money to do it. And so it is definitely possible to go this route without paying a ton of money. So figure out, routes around the expensive sort of sponsorship dollars. If you're a hardware or physical product, of course, you can do a pre-order campaign. Preparing for pre-order launch could honestly be a whole presentation of its own. But take a look at some successful campaigns and get a sense for how they built out their launch strategy. So, for example, SheerTex was a company in YC that was making unbreakable sheer pantyhose. The founder, Catherine, made a great, really compelling video. She pitched press. She launched on Hacker News, where, Hacker News is probably, it's a very male audience. So we were curious how they would respond to something like sheer, unbreakable pantyhose, but they loved it. They thought it was very clever. They thought, the technical piece behind it was really interesting. So I would recommend, like any company, try to launch and see how different communities respond. She launched on Product Hunt. She asked her friends and family and batchmates and investors to help spread the word. And she had an incredibly successful campaign. And so, of course, there's the new feature or new product line launches. So 2 very different companies that do this incredibly well are Stripe and Glossier. So both companies are incredibly smart about how they launch new products. So Stripe has always been great from the very beginning. They've been really great at engaging the community. So every time they launch a product, so for example, when they launched Stripe Atlas, they launched it on Hacker News, and the founders were in the thread talking to all, potential users and talking about the product and why they were launching it, the problems that they felt it was solving. They blogged about it. They spread the word on social media. They pitched press. And this is something that they do over and over again. If you look at Stripe's blog, if you look at Hacker News, you can kind of see the history. Since the beginning, they've been very great at sort of activating the community. Glossier, which is a beauty brand, is incredible at launching new product. And the way they think about it is actually very scientific. They release products on a very specific cadence at specific intervals. And for every product, they essentially hit every single launch button again and again. So community, social media, press, advertising. So each time this new product launches, which is basically like every 6 to 8 weeks, they have this cycle going. So there's a constant drumbeat about Glossier out in the world. one last note before we jump into questions is while you're in startup school, you should start to build your own communities. And you can do this even really pre-product. So there was one YC founder, Gadi Evron, who is founder of Symmetria, and he had a really particularly successful TechCrunch launch. A TechCrunch launch is, a story about what they were doing, launched in TechCrunch, and I noticed that they had a ton of shares, a ton of engagement. So I asked him to share, how did you set this up? What did you do to share and spread the word about your launch? And he said that over the years, even before launching the product, he started to build his own email list. So every person he met that he discussed his startup with, even very loosely, he would add them to an email list, and they would get, sort of email updates about what he was working on a semi-regular, at semi-regular intervals. So when the TechCrunch article came out, he said he sent that email to the list full of all the people that he'd ever talked to, other startup founders, investors, friends, family, and asked for their help in spreading the news. And he said the response was significant. And he even saw VCs who hadn't invested in them sharing the story from their own personal Twitter accounts. And he said, you would be really surprised by who comes out of the woodwork to help when you ask for it. So I would recommend while you're in startup school, you have the opportunity to talk to so many people about what you're building and start and ask them, hey, can I add you to my update list? And over time, that you'll get that into the hundreds, maybe even thousands. So I would definitely recommend that you start doing that now. And so to sum up, I want you to stop thinking about launching as this one moment in time. I don't want you to spend all of startup school getting ready for this one big day, this one big launch day that you're trying to line up all these things for. This is something that is a continuous process that you can do over the course of the next couple months and into the life cycle of your company. If you didn't catch them the first time, these are all the opportunities that we went over. And I'm Kat. So if you ever have any questions, it's demo day is coming up, so I might be slightly slower than usual to respond, but you can always reach out, Kat at Y Combinator, and I'm also on Twitter.
Okay. So like I said, some of it was, really from a technology business perspective, but there's some really good stuff here. I don't know how many of you have looked at sharing launches or ideas or new product variations, for example, on Facebook groups, if you're on Facebook or Instagram or some of the others. If in some cases you may have the ability to offer some sort of code on your e-commerce site, you can include that code. That it doesn't just have to be an email or whatever it can be. There's so many channels out there now, and I'm familiar with Facebook groups, and I know there's lots of others. There's Reddit, Reddit, which is they have these things called subreddits, which are the same thing as groups basically. And it's people that are interested in things. And, if you take it a step further and you kind of combine newsjacking with product launches, if you're like, for example, I'm a golf fan and the Masters golf tournament is coming up not too long from now. So I could see, you may not make pimento cheese sandwiches like they offer at the Masters, but perhaps there's something related to the Masters or golf or spring or whatever that you could launch. And it could be for a limited time. It could have a code of some kind that requires people to use that code to get whatever the special deal is. That also works really well. This new slang word, collabs, which are collaborations or partnerships, working with other brands, to leverage their reach, in the same sort of way. But there's so many audiences now. We've seen, like in Kimes' case, he was featured on a news show, I think on the Greensboro Fox television station, and he was deluged with orders that came out of that relatively brief exposure. I mean, it's a one-time thing as far as I know. Is that right, Todd?
Actually, no, they have run that over and over again. I think it's been run 6 times.
Oh my
And every
goodness.
Yeah, it does. Every time they need to fill a spot with made in North Carolina section or a food section, they slap that version in there. And Craig had told me that. He said, "Oh man," he said, "this will go on and on and on." I think they were featured a year before me, and they're still running his stuff too. So yeah, and like I say, that's advertising that I could never afford, and
Did
it's
you
ongoing.
approach them or did they find
No,
you?
no, they found me through one of my wholesale accounts. They were in and they were just going through the local section, and they said, "You know what? I bet there's a story here."
I
And they
got
give
you.
me a call, and here we go. So
I got you. I wouldn't be surprised that that's something that a number of stations are looking for. If you know, it makes sense. It wouldn't be the only ones, and you know, perhaps you could reach out and with the link to that video, showing them, say, "Hey, Raleigh or whatever, you know, Asheville, other places. Let's do something like this on your station." You know, that's a pretty good outreach thing. I would assume. And you could even steal Keim's video, even if it's not you, right? And say, "Here's my friend Keim, and you know, this is what they did, and we'd like to do something similar with our brand." Uh, you know, just to give them. I think the more you help people think it through, the faster they can say yes or no. You know, instead of them having to figure everything out. And I think Keim's point that you know it's been shown at least 6 times. You know, I mean, that's a pretty good. Thing to talk about and to mention to people like, hey, this will be something your viewers will find interesting. And you know, I think particularly for food related businesses coming up here with spring and summer, you know, there's more of an inclination. We have our special events like Easter and other, you know, Kentucky Derby, maybe, I don't know, golf tournaments, et cetera. But these are all ways to think about, you know, how to promote your stuff contextually in a context that people can relate to. And if somebody has figured out, you know, like in Keim's case, it's a story. You might remember the video we showed of uh, the guy. What was the hell? Now my mind has gone blank. The guy in Pittsburgh that was making pasta. He was on a morning show making pasta. And apparently, my understanding is, and I don't know that it was necessarily that particular episode, but I believe he's been featured on every morning show in every Major League Baseball city, is my understanding. And I guess it started with Pittsburgh. I don't know. I might be jumping to conclusions here, but the idea, you get the idea that, you know, content producers like television, maybe radio to a lesser extent, or other media, they're constantly looking for ideas, and they're looking for ideas that have some proof of that they'll work, right? That they'll have some benefit to them, which is what they're looking for. They're looking for something that they can stick ads on, they can, you know, that their viewers will remember, et cetera, et cetera. And something like that from a production perspective is really, really cheap, right? I mean, that's not super expensive. I bet you they shot Keim's thing on an iPhone. I wouldn't be at all surprised, but maybe they used cameras. I don't know, Keim. What do you think?
no, they did. They had an iPhone. They actually had a mini that they set up, and then they actually had the guy holding the camera doing his shoot with the lighting and all that. But yeah, they had a whole production crew in the well, actually just two of them, but there were multiple cameras in various locations. And then they just went back to the to their office and just cut and mingled and put all this together. And through the magic, it I think it turned out great.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's what we have for today. You know, I am going to be at the Flavor Show tomorrow for any of you that will be there. I'll try to stop by everyone's booth if you're there in the booth, or if we just run into each other wandering around. You know, hopefully it'd be nice to meet everyone in person. I have met very few people, although last year I went to the Flavor Show for maybe an hour. I had some meetings and I went by there before it actually started. So, but this time I'm gonna make more of an effort to stick around and see everybody. So hopefully I'll see you there. And you know, if does anybody have any questions or comments that they want to throw out? Okay, so we will not have class tomorrow. I couldn't didn't want to take a chance on the logistics of trying to do that. And everyone I talked to said they were going to the show. So I figured, why fight City Hall, as they say, right? So won't be any class tomorrow. Wednesday is our CPG guy, Andy Galinsky, who, as I mentioned, is the executive who bought Burt's Bees for Clorox. He knows everything about consumer product goods. He's a wonderful guy. You'll enjoy his presentation. He has some great stories of really small brands that made it really big, and he's got some insights into that. So I hope everyone can make that. And on Thursday, what we're going to cover is some of you might be familiar with the 5-Minute Marketing Makeover. It's a book. It's a book called Story Brand. It's been very, very popular, and it's what it is. It's a really quick way to kind of measure your website. Is it set up properly from not so much from a technology perspective, more so from a marketing perspective? What is the message? How is that set up? I think it's fantastic. It's one of the best resources I have run across. And he's got some statistics that really back up what he's saying. And when you see it, you'll say, man, that makes a lot of sense. I should take a look at this. So that's what we have this week. And so I hope to see some of you all tomorrow, and the rest, everybody, on Wednesday with Andy. All righty. Take care.